My name is Charles Renner, Module Entrepreneur in Action, Assessment 1, a presentation based on the studying tour identifying entrepreneurs in action in real-life enterprises, or creating and preparing to launch the student's own enterprise. In the video, I aim to show the analysis of the two entrepreneurs I interview and determine what makes an entrepreneur successful. An entrepreneur is an individual running his or her own business. An entrepreneur demonstrates enterprising approaches and attributes such as creativity, vision, responsiveness to opportunity, and ambition for business growth, which are distinct from business skills and knowledge. In this video, we will look at some examples of entrepreneurs in action and whether there is a certain trait which they will carry in order for their success. The first entrepreneur I interviewed was a farmer from Northumberland. In 1997, he got the tenancy for North Bellshill Farm with no startup capital, and he relied on bank loans in order to pay the rent. In 2006, he then decided to buy the 300 acres of Bellshill Farm. He used the farm cottages as a deposit and bought the farm on an 85% mortgage rate. The business slowly developed with the arable, and he tried to introduce a sheep flock. To keep the farm going, he also tried to introduce a clothing line, but this is yet to take off as he doesn't have the time. He also renovated some buildings to make holiday cottages, which are helping the farm's income. But in 2014, he realised that the arable wasn't making any money, so he decided to sell all his arable and bought 500 acres of grassland, where he could increase his calf and sheep numbers. Nowadays, he has 100 cattle after starting off with 2, and last year he lambed 400 ewes. For the future, John said that if we increase cow numbers, we need more land. Land could become cheaper, so there may be opportunities to expand the suckler cow enterprise. But the idea is to set up another 100 cow unit, so we can control the disease in the same way and maintain 2 disease-free herds, as it is seen that the disease-free beef is selling more as a more expensive product. Also, to the holiday cottage business, he wants to develop more housing when the opportunity arises. The second entrepreneur I interviewed was another farmer in the same area as John. Pete is a bit younger than John, and he managed to already have a farm and startup capital to start the business. He built his business up in 2010 when he took over the farm and created a 200 cow unit with all the arable. Before, it was just a smaller cow unit with a bit less arable. He then made the soil better, and this is producing higher yields than it did in the past. At university, he realised that food assurance was key to making profits, so now his livestock has many schemes linked with them, such as Red Tractor and Leaf. But on his arable side, he has the biggest tractors, and this isn't good for the cash flows, and he uses the cow herd to keep the arable going. Last year he decided to put in planning permission for 2 holiday cottages on his land. Before doing this, he researched and found that 9 million people a year visit the Northumbrian coast, and they need a place to stay. Hence his interest in more holiday cottages. In the next few years, he hopes to introduce a small pig unit, and then a few more years along the line, he hopes to introduce a small farm shop selling his own produce. Both John and Pete are good entrepreneurs, as they still have their business to show for it. I think John is the better entrepreneur, as he has had to adapt in order for his company to stay alive, since it has been around for longer. Since John is of an older generation, he has had to teach himself how to use the technology that Pete has grown up with. They have both gone down the holiday cottage route, and both have done research into the sector. So far, it seems that the holiday cottages are helping both companies. John plans to introduce a new cow unit and keep it disease-free as more and more markets are looking for non-diseased meats. Whereas Pete wants to open up a new farm shop, and this will hopefully benefit from all the tourists in the spring and summer, but it might not be as successful in the winter. Both have good options for the future, and we're excited to see how their business will develop in the future. I gave 4 people a test, and these are the results. The test focused on a person's need for achievement, their autonomy, what their competence was, their relatedness, and their locus of control. I used this to determine whether there was a certain trait which entrepreneurs carried. I tested 2 entrepreneurs against 2 people who worked for companies. This graph shows the mindsets of a few people I interviewed. 2 of them aren't entrepreneurs, but they are forward-thinking people and are high up in the developing business they work for, so I thought this would be a good comparison. John Renner, John Parker, and Stuart are similar ages, with Nicholas being a few years younger and from Germany. The highest need for achievement is John Parker, and Stuart has the lowest score. John Renner has the highest score in the autonomy test, with Nicholas having the lowest score. John Renner has the highest score for competence, with John Parker having the lowest score. Nicholas has the highest score for relatedness, and Stuart has the lowest score. Stuart and John Renner have the highest possible mark in locus of control, and John Parker has the lowest mark out of the group. There's little to separate the 2 entrepreneurs from the people working in jobs. So does this show there's no such thing as an entrepreneur's mindset? I think not, as both John Renner and Nicholas are the entrepreneurs, and they both scored highly in the competence test. The definition of competence is to have the ability to do something successfully or efficiently, and I feel this is the key for an entrepreneur to be successful. I feel that confidence is also key for an entrepreneur, as if you aren't confident with your ideas and speaking out, then it will be hard to convince people to use your product and to manage people at a later date. On the internet, they say to take risks, but I feel if you calculate the risks and identify the outcomes, then that may reduce the risk. You can possibly manage the product to have a reduced impact on these risks. I would say managing risks is important. I would also say that cash management is important. As a startup business, it will be hard to get money, but very easy to lose it and make the business to fail. To conclude this video, I feel there isn't a main trait for an entrepreneur, as it takes a lot of other traits. But as I said before, I think the main trait is competence. But you can't start a business with just that. You need to be able to take and solve risks. You need to be confident. You need to have cash management. All of these are key, and there are many more that make a good entrepreneur.